Hi everyone. Today I'm responding to a question which has come through on one of the videos on the channel, and it comes from Emma. Emma says, "Hi, I have a question about alchemy. I'm very new to it. I have been seeing images of alchemy everywhere, especially images of the sun in alchemy. It follows me and I keep seeing it everywhere. I was just wondering, I know that alchemy exists on its own. However, I was wondering how alchemy can be used to create a better quality of life for a person. Or how can alchemy be used to cleanse oneself of the lower negative emotions, or at least create some relief? Can alchemy be used this way? Can you point me to any videos on your channel or sources of information that can be of use? Thank you." That's from Emma. So I'd like to respond to that in this video today. And I want to kind of preface what I'm about to say with the observation that alchemy is a very mysterious tradition. Alchemy sits within the broader tradition of Western esoteric thinking, alongside things like the Jewish mystical tradition Kabbalah, with its tree of life. Alchemy is a mystery tradition essentially, and a tradition of magic, or what would have been called during the medieval period occult philosophy. Which means the hidden philosophy, the philosophy of things hidden. And so I want to say that because I am struggling to understand alchemy myself. I am making an effort to understand it, and this effort is hindered in many ways by the sheer obscurity, intentional obscurity of the topic. You see, the alchemical adepts, the philosophers of alchemy, were deliberately secretive. This is what occult means. Occult means hidden or secret. So they were deliberately elusive around what they were saying, partly to avoid persecution from the Roman Catholic Church during the Middle Ages and the medieval period, but also because there was a feeling that what alchemy was in essence was a hidden knowledge, an ancient knowledge, indeed a sacred or divine knowledge, and as such it would be irresponsible for those who had attained an understanding of it to spread it amidst the masses willy-nilly, so to speak, to dispense it here, there, and everywhere, because this would pollute or dilate or otherwise, damage the purity and the sacred integrity of the knowledge. So was the thinking, at least, of the alchemical adepts, as I understand it. So it was a mystery tradition, a tradition of occult philosophy, or esoteric philosophy, and there was associated with that a kind of secretness, all tied up with it. So all of these things make our understanding of alchemy difficult, or more complex at least. So let me see if I can address Emma's question a bit more specifically. She raises some really interesting points. So the thrust of the question is, can alchemy be used to create a better quality of life for a person? Let's talk about that. So the short answer, I think, would be yes. And the long answer would be that some interpretations of the alchemical tradition see it as essentially a tradition of spiritual transformation. Particularly, this is salient in a book called, I believe it's called the Hermetic Mystery, or an inquiry into the Hermetic Mystery, by Mary Ann Atwood in the 19th century, and also Carl Jung, significantly Carl Jung, the student of Sigmund Freud. Both Atwood and Jung took the view on alchemy that it was in essence a spiritual tradition, and the preserved wisdom of the mystery traditions. This, I think, was emphasized perhaps most lucidly by Atwood in her book. I believe it's called An Inquiry into the Hermetic Mystery. Perhaps I'll put a reference to the book in this video. I must emphasize that book is a stunning piece of work. For me, it is the most lucid account of alchemy that I've ever read. It's still obscure, it's still really difficult, it's still a complex work and a difficult work, I feel, but it's as lucid as they come, at least what I've seen and what I've read. Anyway, so Atwood and Jung, what are they both saying? They're saying that alchemy is essentially bringing forth the wisdom of the mystery traditions. And now specifically what I mean by that is, you know, you've got probably the most famous of the mystery traditions is the Eleusinian Mysteries, the mysteries of ancient Greece. This was an integral part of ancient Greek culture, which, as I understand it at least, any citizen of ancient Greece had the right or the opportunity, I think is kind of viewed as a right, or the opportunity to partake in the Eleusinian Mysteries, at least at one point in their life. And it was a sort of thing where once you had attended the Eleusinian Mysteries, you could not attend them again. If you'd attended, it was a once in a lifetime kind of experience, but you were entitled to this experience. Without falling down the rabbit hole of the Eleusinian Mysteries, what they were essentially a visionary cult, wherein members would travel to the Greek city of Eleusis and partake in a religious ritual, essentially, through which they were supposed to understand the drama of Demeter, her daughter Persephone, and the snatching of Persephone into the underworld Hades. So Demeter was a Greek deity of nature. This is my understanding, at least. Demeter was the personification of the natural world, the mountains, the trees, the forests, the oceans, this kind of Gaian spirit. Of course, I could be completely wrong about this. This is my understanding of the Eleusinian Mystery. So Demeter was this nature goddess, essentially, and Demeter had this daughter in Greek mythology called Persephone, and what happened was, according to the Greek myths, Persephone was snatched down into the underworld of Hades, snatched by Hades into the underworld, and this occurred for a 6-month cycle. And so, as summer comes to an end, this transition from summer into autumn was symbolically understood by the Greeks to be the time when Hades snatched Persephone away, and so Persephone would go, the flourishing, the bountiful unfolding, and the glory of spring and summer would then contract and be stultified and be put to an end through the death, degradation, disintegration, and disorder of autumn, or fall, and winter. And so these 6 months were when Persephone was in the underworld, and Demeter was essentially weeping for her lost daughter, and so she was not exuberant and joyous as in the months of spring and summer, but was melancholic, in a dark mood, and the radiant sun was far away, and those kind of joyous emotions were distant. And then the dawning of spring was associated with the return of Persephone to Demeter, because Demeter and Hades had struck a deal, I think, where Hades would have Persephone for 6 months and then return her, and then have her for 6 months and then return her. And on this return, we get the blooming of the flowers, the rejuvenation, the regeneration of nature through spring, and then its ultimate glory in summer. And so the 4 seasons were explained mythologically according to this myth cycle of the snatching of Persephone by Hades and the return of Persephone to Demeter for a 6-month period, and then the cycle would renew. So the Greeks could have an ecstatic experience, a visionary experience, an ego transcending experience, you could say, at this site called Eleusis, this town, this place in ancient Greece. You could go there, you could travel there, and you could become initiated into the Eleusinian Mysteries. And this would mean that you would come to a mystical, interior understanding of this myth cycle I've just explained, of the nature of Demeter, Persephone, Hades, nature, and you could attain a complete understanding of things. And also this initiation would give you you would be able to partake in the life of Greek culture in a more full and wholesome way. This was the doorway into a full and complete consciousness of who you are in the ancient Greek culture, as I understand it. And so this mystery tradition, the Eleusinian Mysteries, is very interesting to me. I'm completely fascinated by it. And the reason I've just outlined all of that is because a way of seeing alchemy is as a kind of as a hermetically sealed, the word hermetically sealed comes from the idea of having a vase or a kind of container that's got a plug in it, and it's sealed from external influence, and hermetically sealed comes from the kind of alchemical mythos, but the alchemy is an alchemically sealed it has captured the ancient mysteries, the ancient mysteries of Greece at Eleusis, and also the ancient Egyptian mysteries, the mysteries of the Duat, the realm of the dead, and the soul's travel after death, which was a big part of ancient Egyptian lore as well. And so, and Greece was in relationship to Egypt for much of its kind of existence, and Greece drew much on the older Egyptian culture. Anyway, so there's mystery traditions within these ancient worlds, and what the notion of the mystery is. Specifically, we take like the Eleusinian Mysteries, is that I am, as a Greek citizen, uninitiated. I am not fully complete. I have not had what the Native Americans or some Native American tribes, indigenous people of the Americas, call the big dream. Okay, this mind expanding, the soul enhancing, this expansive experience of a vision, a great vision. And the fullness of this great vision has not filled my soul before my initiation at Eleusis, and therefore I cannot fully partake in the reality and the richness of my culture until I have had this initiation, this visionary experience, or what we might call a mystical or a spiritual experience, which is all to say that it is until I have contacted the sacred, until I have contacted the transcendent, something far beyond my limited identity, my mortal, my finite identity, until I have touched that, until I have related to that, until I have come to know that, until I have been filled by the light of that, then I am in some sense incomplete, and I can in some sense not fully partake in the culture. A very interesting perspective to me, and as I say, this rite was deeply woven into perhaps the progenitor, the culture which was the nucleus and progenitor of many of our Western values, many of our ways of seeing, many of our philosophies, many of our traditions of art, etc. Ancient Greece, and I don't know enough about it, but it seems the Eleusinian Mysteries were pretty central to the ancient Greek enterprise, culture, civilization, and so that's interesting to me. And because they were a visionary rite, and so that's fascinating to me. So there's a few different threads, of course, that have been opened up here, and I tend to meander on these things. I'm trying to talk about alchemy. I'm trying to answer Emma's question. So let's just take the idea of visions. Let's take the idea of the imagination, okay? Let's put it this way. The Eleusinian Mysteries were there to enrich the imagination of the initiates, and to enrich the imagination of the initiates with a broader cultural dream, a narrative, a story, a mythos which exists far beyond the limited confines of an individual identity, of an ego, an egoic narrative, a selfish narrative, or something like that. Instead, the imagination is empowered and enriched with the lore of the culture, and the great mythic cycle and the great mythic dream is a fragment of that light. Is if it's like a candle, if that's the great candle, then the light of the initiate consciousness is given some of that light through the Eleusinian mysteries, through this vision, through this this ecstatic, imaginative experience. And as I say, alchemy was like a hermetically sealed kind of container of these mystery traditions through the ages. And so we get alchemy kind of being born with Maria the prophetess and Zosimus of Panopolis, these Greeks living in Alexandria in Egypt in around the 3rd century AD, 2nd to 3rd centuries AD, just coincident with the dawning of Christianity too. We get these thinkers who are interested in the transformations of in transformation, and these early thinkers in the 2nd and 3rd century AD represent the dawn and the genesis of alchemy. And then we have this whole alchemical story which then goes into the Islamic Golden Age with Jabir, who is, or Jebba as he was known in the Latin West, who was one of the early progenitors of chemistry. We have Roger Bacon in England. We have Michael Meyer in what is now Germany, who was the court alchemist of Rudolph, the Holy Roman Emperor in the late 16th century. One of the most powerful figures in Europe, was ministered unto by an alchemist called Michael Meyer, who produced the allegorical and symbolic work, the Atlanta Fugiens. And the most famous of all is Newton, Isaac Newton, the English scientist, we call him now. He would have thought of himself as a natural philosopher, who was interested in the Hermetic knowledge, was interested in alchemy, and wrote, by some estimates, 4/5 of his whole opus, all his writings were devoted to the study of alchemy. And so, in a sense, we can think of Newton as the last alchemist in this great tradition, spanning from Zosimus in Greek Egypt in the 2nd to 3rd century AD, all the way through to Newton's Principia Mathematica in the late 17th century. So that's a brief kind of overview of this amazing alchemical tradition that flows to us through. It is an essential thread in the story of the West, and a story or a thread that is unknown to a large extent, and a story untold, and it's a tremendously fascinating one. Anyway, I'm tending to meander with the answering of this question because it is just such a vast and complicated topic. The mystery traditions. What was happening at Eleusis? Well, this empowerment of the imagination, this ecstatic, visionary sight, really, this amazing vision that those who were initiated into the mysteries would behold, and it would completely transform their personality, completely transform their orientation through a living contact with the sacred, a living contact with the central mystery of life. So this mystery tradition was kind of hermetically sealed, let's say, in symbols, in symbols would be the simplest way to put it, in images, in allegory, in metaphor, etc., etc., because it is an imaginative tradition fundamentally, and so this magic really of the Eleusinian Mysteries, the old mystery traditions, which I would, without going too far into that topic, would relate to an earlier tradition of shamanism, which is arguably the world's oldest religion, so a so-called folk religion, which we find everywhere from Siberia to the Amazon to the Pacific Northwest, many different areas of this earth, many different culturally separated cultures, historically separated in time, separated in space, these and ancient peoples, many exhibit what we might broadly call shamanism, but that is a conversation for another day. The reason I mention it is because that at the heart of what a shaman is, the image of the shaman is the shaman is the master of the sacred, and the shaman is the one who can fly upon the great eagle, who can mount the wings of their imagination and enter into the spirit world, commune with the ancestors, commune with a sacred reality, and return to the material plane to channel that wisdom, channel those insights. And so that kind of the shamanic pattern or practice is essentially visionary and essentially concerns itself with something which we might call imaginative, or with the empowerment of imagination. Shamanism is a fascinating topic too, and I think the shamanic roots kind of blossom up into the Eleusinian Mysteries and Egypt, as far as I understand it. Anyway, all of that is hermetically sealed, right? It's sealed in a container of occult lore, esoteric knowledge, which is passed through the generations. You know, it goes to Arabia, to the Middle East. It's kept there in different temples, is revived in the Latin-speaking world, and is brought through into the Renaissance with the discovery of the Hermetic text by Marsilio Ficino, who was the assistant, essentially, of Cosimo de' Medici, who was one of the most powerful figures in Europe, the Florentine banker and lead of the Medici house in the mid 15th century. And this is kind of the birthing of the Italian or the Florentine Renaissance, which had which was a time of the rediscovery of the Hermetica, which are alchemical writings. Let's leave it at that, because I'm really going everywhere on this one. So the tradition's kept in this hermetic seal, right? And a lot of the videos on my channel, a lot of the work I'm trying to do in some of my presentations and stuff like that, is to look at what is within this hermetic seal. Because if it's a symbolic wisdom, you see, then the way we can approach it is through the imago, which is Latin for image. So if we approach images and we understand myths as they exhibit themselves in contemporary film, or in works of art, or in stories, etc. If we take the image, the imago, or the symbol, as the matter of our study, then we can start to study the stuff of dreams. We can start to, and symbols, you see, are like the language of dreams. And this is basically the Hermetic insight. What symbols mean, how they apply to our lives, how the meaning of symbols can enrich our lives, is a complex and open question. And hopefully on this channel, I've gone some ways to unpacking some of the meanings of some of the symbols. I'm definitely not proclaiming to understand. Maybe I'll wait for this to finish. Yeah, I'm definitely not proclaiming to understand exhaustively or absolutely alchemy. It is a mystery. It is best understood as a mystery, and I'm approaching it as a mystery. Part of the mystery of alchemy is the symbols of alchemy, the images of alchemy. And if symbolism is the language of dreams, then if we can understand symbols, then we can understand life, and we can understand ourselves, the microcosm of ourselves, and the macrocosm of the heavens above. So a classical alchemical insight or saying written in the emerald tablet is "as above, so below." So as the cosmos operates in the above, in the macrocosmos, so too the cosmos operates here below in the microcosmos of the human being. And that is a really ennobling vision of our humanity, I feel, is that we are, in our essence, microcosmoses. We are worlds unto ourselves, insofar as our thoughts, our visions of life, our philosophies, our actions, our bodies, our relationships, how we live, this whole drama which we call life, is, in a sense, a microcosmos, a repetition of the greater image of the whole. the whole cosmos above, and the microcosmos here below. So this pertains slightly to the beginning of Emma's question, where Emma says that she's been seeing images of alchemy everywhere, especially images of the sun in alchemy. Now, the sun is an important symbol in the view of alchemy, and the reason for this is because the sun is, of course, the center of the macrocosmos, so the cosmos above. Okay, the cosmos of the heavens. The sun is this. Well, it's the thing that gives life to plants, and the animals eat the plants, and so it is, in a very direct sense, the sustainer of our life, the sun. And it's also the sustainer of consciousness, because how can anything be seen? How can any perception occur in the absence of light? And what is the great source of light? It is the sun. And so the sun is a cosmically important entity, and thus the symbol of the sun is tremendously important too. And Gerhard Dorn, a medieval alchemist, made this brilliant kind of allegory between the great sun above, which is visible, and the sun below, which is invisible. And the sun below is the consciousness of man, the perceiving consciousness of you watching this video here, paying attention. It's the you that's behind the thoughts. It's the you that's watching all of this. It's the you that's organizing all of these ideas and the meaning. And it's that observer behind there is what Gerhard Dorn called the invisible sun within us, the illuminating factor of our consciousness. Whereas, the visible sun is this thing illuminating the background of this video. That's more visible. The invisible sun is perhaps consciousness itself, or soul, or something like that. And this in alchemy was the image of the star within, the stellar energy within us, because the sun is, of course, a star, and we are, of course, made of the stuff of stars. If stars were not, then we would not have the chemical components to be what we are. And so, in a sense, in a very real and direct sense, we are wrought of the stuff of stars, and our essence is thus stellar. So that speaks somewhat to this alchemical image of the sun, Emma. Hopefully that speaks a bit to the context and the meaning of the symbol. It's also the way the alchemists represent the sun is a circle with a point in the middle, or a dot in the middle. And that's the alchemical symbol of the sun. And I've recently produced a presentation in July called The Star Within. And in one of the sections, I think it's one of the first sections of that presentation, I really dive deeper into this image. It's what Pythagoras called the monad, and what Neoplatonists call the one. And this image of the one, I kind of trace in that part of the presentation through kind of microscopic atomic structure is organized according to this monadic image, but also cellular structure, and also kind of the structure of our organism, say the heart being the center of the circle, and then all of our blood flow, all of our exteriority of the body is a kind of circling around the center of the heart. Blood is called blood circulation. So this idea of the circle is, again, resonant through multiple levels of analysis. Then, of course, you've got the literal sun, the great sun, which is, again, this axis which solar bodies circle around like this. And then you've got, the Milky Way at the greater scales. So through many, many scales, this one image, the Pythagorean monad, or the alchemical symbol of the sun, is resonant, or this symbol is impressing itself upon multiple levels of reality. And so to me, that indicates we're in the presence of truth. That's my feeling, at least. And if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to the website I operate called waystoself.com, waystoself.com, and I offer a content subscription there where I produce monthly presentations on these topics. So you can find out more about that there. Let me see if I can get to the rest of Emma's question, because this has turned into a bit of a meandering video. Meandering's not a problem in itself. Rivers meander, and so I think it's a good thing for us to act in accordance with nature and in harmony with nature. And so I don't necessarily think that meandering is such a problem, because hopefully there's a core of meaning to what I'm saying that is being teased out through the wandering and the meandering. But I'd like to have some kind of coherence to the video. So what have I talked about? Eleusis, I've talked about the mysteries at Eleusis, the mysteries at ancient Egypt, and I've tied them in a way to earlier shamanic rites. And I've talked about how, with the ascendancy of Christianity, I haven't really emphasized that as much, but there was this ascendancy of Christianity when Theodosius, I believe it was Theodosius, Roman emperor, made Christianity the state religion of Rome. And so this religion's kind of expanding and coming to dominance, and these mystery traditions, what so-called pagan traditions, are being suppressed at that time. And so alchemy is kind of the quintessence of that wisdom, if you like, the nectar, the elixir of that wisdom, and it's transmitted through the generations from Zosimus in the 3rd century up to Newton, and the birth of science, I might add. And in a video on this channel called The Magical Origins of Our World, I try my best to illustrate the mythical, magical, and mysterious origins of our science in occult philosophy, magic, and kind of imaginative traditions. So let me see if I can round out my answer to Emma's question. Can alchemy help us create a better quality of life? Well, and part of that question is, how can alchemy be used to cleanse oneself of the lower negative emotions? Good questions. So a simplistic understanding of what is being said in alchemy is that you can understand it in terms of 3 phases. It's a simplistic model perhaps because alchemy is deeply mysterious and complex, but it's a model that I think is true enough to employ as a heuristic for understanding alchemy. So alchemy, 3 phases. 3 phases really of metamorphosis, of transformation. And the alchemists are trying to transform what they call lead or base metal or base matter into a noble metal, a noble matter. So lead into gold. And so we have 3 phases: the blackness or the blackening, which is associated with the metal lead and the planet Saturn. We have the whitening or the whiteness, which is associated with Luna, the moon. We have the rubedo, the reddening, the redness, which is associated with the sun, and gold. And so we have lead, silver, gold, Saturn, moon, sun, black, white, red, all of those. That's the kind of thematic, symbolic material associated with this alchemical dream. What does it all mean? Well, the first stage, the blackness or the blackening, is called the negredo in Latin. And what that is all about is, in Emma's question, what does she say? How can alchemy be used to cleanse oneself of the lower negative emotions? The negredo, the blackening, is all about that. Okay, so the agricultural metaphor would be the spreading of manure across the fields, or the decomposition process, the process of decomposition or putrefaction. A big image in the negredo is the image of death, the grim reaper, the harvester. And so what this is all to say is that the the purging of lower negative emotions is a stage in alchemy, a phase in alchemy, which speaks to the nature of transformation, kind of how old forms need to die, like a caterpillar must die ultimately to attain its metamorphosis into something radically other than what it is, a butterfly. And so the alchemists would smile with a knowing wisdom at the degradation and destruction and dissolution of old structures, and the this symbolic death, because they would know that the work is underway. Our great work of transformation is now underway because of this. This nigredo is underway. What does this mean? Psychologically, it could mean a breakdown, a mental breakdown, an existential breakdown, a crisis. It could mean the ending of a career. It could mean the ending of a relationship. It could be an identity crisis. I thought I was this my whole life, but I'm not that. Like, what does that mean? Where does that leave me, etc.? All of this psychological chaos, this inner confusion, this inner disharmony is associated with the alchemical nigredo. And perhaps it could take decades for the nigredo to play out in our lives, because we are, after all, part of nature. And as we need to spread dung and manure over fields to make the soil rich and fertile for new growth and new form to arise, so too perhaps we could embrace our shit, because again, shit and feces and dung and all of this is part of the alchemical imagery, actually, because the alchemist considers themselves to be a kind of like a worker with nature. It's called the natural, a form of natural philosophy. And so if there's wisdom in nature, the alchemist is trying to work with the wisdom of nature to facilitate the process of growth and transformation. And so if something needs to die, if something needs to fall into a chaos and into a disorder, then this can be embraced and facilitated and understood by the alchemist, and wisdom can be drawn from this, because it is understood that the process of transformation is underway. So this could mean crying, it could mean the purging of grief, it could mean talking through things in therapy, it could mean producing certain pieces of art, it could mean just a sadness, a melancholy, which occasions deep reflection and deep meditation upon the values we hold and the way of life that we're living. All of these things, I think, are associated with the nigredo, a breakdown and a death of old forms, old ways of life, old values, old beliefs. So it might be interesting, Emma, to note that the alchemists had a language for this, had a symbol for this, had an image for this. I at least found that tremendously interesting when I discovered it. And ultimately, let's round this video out a bit. How can alchemy help create a better quality of life? Well, let me just allude to that a little bit, because the next stage from nigredo is albedo, the whitening, or the lunar dawn. The voice of the soul comes to the fore. And what this is the dawning of the imagination, the dawning of symbolic awareness. And this is like the initiate at Eleusis, who may have been in a disoriented and lost and despairing, lead-like, stuck, kind of imprisoned orientation, the blackness, before the initiation, and is led by the initiates to Eleusis, and there is met with a vision divine, a great, magnificent big dream, and there their imagination is full with the mythos of their culture, and they're acquainted with sacred images, sacred symbols, and a sacred power. This is analogous to the alchemical notion of albedo, the whiteness or the whitening, which all has to do with the psychological transformation from a movement out of purely materialistic understanding, an understanding of myself according to when I was born in space and in time, in historical time, when I was born in historical time and when I will die in historical time, this kind of horizontal dimension of my existence and my purely kind of extended materiality, that I am just this body and I'm just living this historical life. It's an initiation into a deeper awareness, and an awareness of our eternal self, and an awareness of our immortal soul, and an awareness of that within us which partakes in eternity. A strange topic, of course, and I'm talking about an experience. I'm talking about the overwhelming experience that people will have had at Eleusis, or the experience which is pretty much scientifically being induced at places like Johns Hopkins, who are researching protocols for curing, for example, smoking addiction, or end of life care with cancer patients with terminal diagnosis, staring death in the face with very little historical time left on this earth. And Johns Hopkins are using a chemical called psilocybin, which interacts with the serotonergic pathways in our brain, which is the active psychedelic chemical in magic mushrooms, many forms of mushrooms which grow naturally upon the earth. They're using psilocybin to induce what they call mystical type experiences. And these experiences are experiences of unity, oneness, and a sense of the transcendent, essentially. They are visionary experiences, and they are essentially empowerments of the imagination. They transport people from a place of ego to a place beyond ego, to a place of soul, we might say. And this was known to the Greeks with their traditions at Eleusis, known to ancient shamans, is being now rediscovered through the lens of science with the research at Johns Hopkins, and seeing how it qualitatively and radically improves the quality of life of people with terminal cancer diagnoses. They're facing death, they're staring death in the face, and these mystical experiences are having transformative effects upon their personality, upon their perspective. And I think that's incredibly important to emphasize that. So there's real empirical research coming out which is validating this from another angle, let us say. Anyway, so that's all associated with the albedo. About albedo is thinking an image, the reawakening, the rekindling of the imago. Understanding yourself as partaking in a mythos, in a story far greater than your own personal historical story, which is not to invalidate or to undermine your personal historical story, but is instead to enrich, embolden, and give new life to it. Which is to say, without myth, we starve. The soul starves without myth. And so the albedo really is associated to the rediscovery of our myth, the contact of our myth. Psychologically, I'm speaking about my psychology, I'm speaking about your psychology, Emma, or anyone else who's listening. Your psychology, your personal psychology, your feeling of living emotional contact with mythos, your inner understanding of how your thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, perspectives, acts, decisions, choices, etc. resonate with a deeper vision of life, a deeper myth cycle, a deeper story. I won't necessarily go into illuminating that too much because I think a lot of my content is devoted to that, and I'm happy to produce more content on those topics if you comment below, because that is really at the heart of a lot of what I'm trying to do with my work, is to look at myths and to look at great visions of imagination and to tease out the meaning in them, and to situate our personal stories and lives in relationship to those myths, and thereby hopefully engender a certain harmony. A harmony, that's a musical metaphor, a harmony between the tune of our life and the great tune, the cosmic rhythms and cycles. It is a form of alignment, really, a form of tuning our being in to this truth, a form of remembering, a form of recollection. And so the Albedo, the whitening, the lunar dawn, is the awakening of the imagination for the alchemists. And yes, Emma, this can help create a better quality of life. Absolutely. And the real thing is that it produces meaning. It produces authentic meaning. It gives you a sense, a knowing, a gnosis of what life means, what your life means. It is a validation and an underwriting, in a way, of your existence, your suffering, the lows, the difficulties, the struggle of life, and your victories, your highs, the great potential and the great dreams towards which you are working. This whole myth, the comedy, the tragedy, all of it of your life is understood or underwritten or contextualized, recontextualized, put in the framework of a greater story. Let us say that, at least a greater story, and that story is to be found in the imagination. And so the play of our imagination attains to a harmony with the cosmic imagination, you could say. And on the theme of imagination, it is important to remember that everything, every cultural thing, everything you see around you, every building, every road, every school, university, shop, etc., flows into the material world from the source of imagination. All created things have their source, have their origin in the imagination, and it's important to remember this and this mysterious and yet fundamental creative potential which sleeps within all of us. Well, maybe it sleeps, or maybe it can be awakened, empowered and renewed and worked with and cultivated, really. So hopefully that answers the question. I have left off the final third alchemical stage, which is the rubedo, which is kind of imagine the life of the soul. You begin in the blackness, which is the dark night of the soul, which is what Spanish mystic St. John of the Cross talked about, where God feels far away, where the spirit, where the sacred feels very, very, very far away, and we are in darkness. And then we are in that dark night, and then the lunar dawn comes. So light starts to come, the moonlight starts to come, which is a hint of the sun, because the moonlight is a reflection of the sun's light, but that starts to illumine the world in which we are moving. And now we're getting this sense of this dream, of this light, of this hope. And the rubedo is all about the dawning of the sun, the dawning of a new day, and the height and the zenith of the sun, shining light over the entire kingdom and bringing to the fore all of the things of the world. The rubedo is perhaps the part of alchemy I least understand. It is associated with the Philosopher's Stone, the attainment of the Philosopher's Stone, which is arguably the goal of alchemy. It is associated with the coincidentia oppositorum, the union of opposites. That's a Taoist symbol, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine. All of these opposites and complexities of life find their union, find their ultimate harmony and wholeness in the rubedo. And it is a phase of completion. It is, I suppose, what happens when we rediscover the imagination, when we rediscover this creative impulse within us, when we rediscover the voice of our ancestors, etc. And what happens when we attend to that, when we cultivate that, when we nurture that, and we bring that forth into the drama of our personal lives, of our lives in space and time, when we make it concrete, when we make the abstract specific, when we do a specific thing, and when we create works and do things and make contributions in the material world, and we return from the spirit to matter, and how the world can be ennobled in that way, how it can be enriched and empowered and given new life that way. This, I think, is all to do with the rubedo, the realization of our authentic potential, the realization of who we are, etc. The attainment of the self, as Carl Jung would put it, living in Tao, living in harmony, the kingdom of heaven. I don't know. There are some images I suppose I could give you in spiritual language for what the rubedo means. It's perhaps the part of alchemy I least understand, so let me leave it at that. But it's perhaps the goal or the ultimate possibility of alchemy, which alchemy calls us towards, which is a rich, creative vision of life, living in our creative empowerment, living in tune with life, in tune with our soul, and our soul in turn in tune with the greater rhythms and harmonies of the world soul, the anima mundi. So hopefully, Emma, that answers the question. How can alchemy help us to create a better quality of life, purge some of our negative emotions, and I talked a bit about what the sun symbol might mean in alchemy too. Yeah, as you might be able to tell, this is a tremendously complex topic. It's, as I said, mysterious and esoteric. The book I would recommend, I'll put in the description. I think Carl Jung has written a lot on alchemy. Mysterium, Coniunctionis by Jung, or Psychology and Alchemy by Jung, or Alchemical Studies by Jung, or Atwood's book, I think, is probably the clearest thing I've read, although Jung's books are amazing too, so I'll put them in the description too. But Atwood's book on the Hermetic Mystery, the tremendous work. So those are some recommendations. Beyond that, I don't see too many people covering the topic of alchemy. There's someone who I've spoken to called Anne Baring, who I think is tremendously wise and insightful, and she's done a lecture series on alchemy, which I highly recommend. It's done a lot for my understanding of the topic. And so that's Anne Baring, Baring, I think. And you should be able to find her on YouTube. I've also had a chat with Anne, and the video should be on this channel too. So check that out perhaps. And yeah, beyond that, I'm really trying to cover these topics, these ideas in as much depth and detail as I can. And so stay tuned for future videos, etc., because I'm really trying to unpack this great mystery of alchemy, and I'm trying to understand, as Emma said, how it can help create a better quality of life for us, what its psychological significance is for us. And this is something Carl Jung emphasized, really. Carl Jung really has put me on to the fact of, or the way of understanding alchemy as a process of spiritual or personality transformation, a process of metamorphosis and metamorphosis of the psyche, the soul, the transformation, the great transformation of our being. That's what it's all about. And so it has real practical relevance for you, for your psychology, for how your life unfolds. And so I think it's tremendously rich and important spiritual tradition, and let's try and unpack it more. So yeah, hopefully that's answered your question, Emma. And to anyone else tuning in, hopefully that's given a bit more perspective on alchemy. Hopefully yeah, that's really been the intent of it. So thanks again for tuning in, and would love to hear any comments or questions below. Thanks.